What are you looking for in the people that you hire?
Well, again, I think in addition to relevance, which we can dig into that too, because I think that that's a broad category that I know it's broad, but that you can be relevant by many ways. The other thing is quality of their character. The two, if we really distill it down to two things: relevance to the job and quality of character. And I guess I'll stop blabbing. I'll go into more details.
Yeah, no. So yeah, go into detail about relevance. So how do you then define relevance, or how will someone prove that they're relevant to you?
Sure. Initially, we try to be as objective as we can with the job descriptions. People know here's what we're looking for. So, for example, when we're hiring salespeople, we're upfront about these people are on the phone. It's an inside team. It's a decent blend of transactional and consultative components to it. So we don't oversell it as this high. If we have a role, for example, that is that is very focused on high volume contact and cold calling into businesses, we don't sell it as something else. And so therefore a person who would be applying to that, someone could be relevant if they don't have 2, 3, 5 years of B2B inside sales calling, but more often than not, we'll certainly look first to those candidates who do have that. And so with technology, we'll look first to those who have operated in a similar environment as ours. If they've built similar products, if they've worked with the same languages and with the same platforms. For editorial, if it's about writing or composing in the same style as we do, the same voice as we do. So again, it's coming first with being very objective, and here's what I have done that maps to that, and then building from there.
That 70% of the women who use Get Raised get a raise. So that's terrific.
We're really happy to hear it too. I mean, we've done we set out to change this problem, and we are glad that we've had a chance to do that. And I like what you said about, sort of feeling equipped. You also have to think about, there's a flip side to this. You're not talking to this faceless entity, you're talking to a boss. And a boss needs something to respond to. I want a raise is very difficult to respond to, but here's market salary, here's where I got that data. Now we can have a discussion, just like I would have a discussion about any other problem, where I can say, well, the market does pay that salary right now, and we might get you to that point, but you have less experience than the typical market person. It becomes a discussion not about your emotional feelings about wanting a raise, and more about why you're paid what you're paid, why you might be able to pay more, and most importantly, if you can't get a raise, what you can do to get on a timeline to get a raise.
Women were great savers, but that they were earning so much less than men, 70 cents on the dollar, that the behavior he wanted to change was to get women to make more money. And the reason they weren't making that much money is because women, on average, were much less likely to ask for a raise. And if you don't ask for it, you could easily be passed over. Caroline, my partner, always says, gone are the days where you put your head down and work like a dog and hope the boss knows to give you a raise. You have to be very, very involved in that process and very proactive about that. My sister has a great phrase that she says, ask and you shall receive. She says that a lot, and it's true. You have to think about asking for something that's important. Now, I've said it before, I'll repeat it again. Salary or compensation was never my driving factor. I've worked for 3 companies in my career. I was at Citigroup for 15 years. I had a couple of offers to leave, several offers, and I didn't, even though some of them were for more salary. But what I did do was negotiate for the salary that I was offered at the company, Citigroup, where I stayed. And I had a couple of really successful salary negotiations, so I'm going to share that with you. But he also, we talked about asking, how important that women don't ask for raises, and when they do, they ask in a very emotional way, not a fact-based way where a case has been made. This is the data. This is what people are getting paid for out there. I am 20% below, or whatever that is. So a lot of people say, wow, the only way to get a raise is to leave the company you're at and go to a new company. But that's not always the case.
If you had to share with people just some strategies or ways that they can strengthen that final 10%, how might they do that?
Well, we can talk about peak performance and what it means. And I think there's this misconception that peak performance is going above and beyond what you've ever done before, reaching a real peak. And actually what it just means is performing at the best of your ability. And you look at the superstars of sports, for example, Derek Jeter of the New York Yankees. He's considered a clutch player,
right?
Someone who always comes in the clutch. He's the one that saves the day. But if you look at his statistics, his batting average is always the same. It's just that he performs well, whether the stakes are low or whether the stakes are high. And so that's really the key to peak performance, is being able to perform at your best, whether the stakes are low or whether the stakes are high. And the key to that is to actually practice under performance conditions. Because what do most people do? They practice, but they don't practice under performance conditions, so that when they are in a performance situation, they're uncomfortable. They're not used to that feeling of nervousness and their fingers being, sweaty, and their hands are clammy and their knees are shaking. Right. So you actually have to practice under performance conditions. So in an interview situation, you're not just talking to the stuffed animal on your bed, you're actually talking to someone who's there making expressions that might be distracting. Or if you're practicing for a negotiation situation, same thing. You want to feel what it feels like to have to be responding in real time.
Can you talk about some strategies to deal with uncertainty or when you're feeling the pressure?
Sure. I mean, it's true. We live in a world that is full of uncertainty, and thanks to the media, we know about all of it now. I don't think there's necessarily more uncertainty than before. It's just that we know about all the things that are uncertain. So I would say the first tip would be to give up this illusion that you're ever going to have everything certain in the world, that you're going to live in this world that there is less uncertainty. So that's the first thing, is giving up that resistance to the way things are, this uncertainty. And then the second thing is to realize that you can only focus on one thing at a time. Your brain, neurologically, can only focus on one thing at a time. And if you focus on the things that you can control, which are basically your thoughts and your actions, you will naturally feel a sense of control regardless of how much uncertainty is around you. So I think about rock climbers, for example. They're out there hanging on the side of a rock. They really don't control much. They don't control the weather. They don't control, a sudden gust of wind. But all they can do is focus on where their next handhold is. And they actually feel an incredible sense of control because they know they prepared their equipment, they know they've got their technique, and they know all they have to do is find the next handhold. So it's really training yourself, training your focus to focus on what you can control. And I think that's a big way to feel more confident in an uncertain environment.
Stay motivated, organized, and troubleshoot your search. That is step 5 of the process. And where we talk about motivation is where we talk about, really getting your nerves under control, really some of that peak performance as it pertains to the job search process. So I did want to highlight, I just agreed so much about the importance of practice in performance conditions, as Renita put it. I would add there, she mentioned examples of interviewing and negotiation. So again, just that's so helpful to highlight. These are great examples of where along your job search, along your career, you're really going to have to harness, the top of your game, your peak performance, for that moment. I would add that in addition to practicing, in, say, a mock interview situation or practicing a negotiation, I would add that it's important to know who you're practicing with. So I have seen instances where I've had a client come to me after they've practiced with, say, someone who's just in a very different career or someone who's very experienced, much more experience in them. And in fact, one of my clients practiced with his, I think it was his mom or his dad, and had come up with these interview responses where it was very clear he was talking literally about a career from generations ago. So remember, this is next generation career success, and you want to be current with what market expectations are. And so it's important, of course, to practice, but it's also important to practice with people who know and people who are going to be able to call out in terms of, hey, you know, you're not making the right eye contact, or this response isn't really bringing out the best in you, or it's not clear, you're not explaining yourself very well, I'm getting lost in this point. So that's definitely something that Connie and I do with our clients. We're not going to unleash them onto the market where the stakes, of course, are very, very high. The first time that you are doing an interview or a negotiation, that shouldn't be with your dream employer. So I always say, practice with us, not your dream employer.
The way to really think, I guess, differently in this market is to really pull on some of the basic concepts of branding. You know, think about yourself and your own selling proposition. You know, what is it about me that is unique? And keep in mind, I think, always that almost every company, you know, no matter what the industry, what the size of the company, what their business is thinking in some way about transformation. You know, where are we going next? There are very few companies that say, this is our business model, this is how we're going to look a year from now. So if you can, as you're thinking about what you have to offer, think in terms of, what do I have to offer to a company in transformation? You know, what have you done that's helped the company grow? What have you done that's helped the company move into a new market? Or if you have less experience, maybe you're earlier in your career, what could I do?
What do you recommend people do in this tough market where hiring managers are being really picky? How do they keep their cool?
Yeah, it comes up a lot. I think there's two things. Number one, you have to find somebody. I mean, your clients have found you. A lot of people find me, I think, to just say, okay, I'm going to tell you how stressed I am. Get it out. Get it out in a safe place, because there's no way that a normal human being isn't going to be stressed under these circumstances. But then you've got to say, okay, you know, I know how I'm feeling inside, but I also know it's showtime. It is showtime. And I have got to stay calm and focused, because it's going to give me power.
Tell us what a strong personal brand is. You know, how do you define that? What are you looking for to say, yes, that person is good at branding?
Sure. So personal branding is about unearthing what makes you special and unique in the marketplace, and then communicating that through various mediums, social media or TV or however, to a specific audience. Not going for everyone, not trying to be everything to everyone, being very niche. And that's what I've done for myself, and that's what I recommend other people do. Because if you try and take too much of the market or become a social media expert or a finance expert, you're not going to get the visibility needed to have a very successful career. So you want to target, let's say, a different demographic, being the personal finance expert for baby boomers or students, or geographically. So being the expert in Korea or a small town nearby. And that's how you have to start thinking, because when people search for experts online, if you've taken that niche, the probability that you'll come up is much greater than if you're competing with a billion sites to be the social media person or the, you know, finance person or the operations person. So being specific is really the key, really narrowing your audience and being the right person to serve that audience.
So for those of our listeners that work for corporations right now and want to establish those relationships, would you say that they just have to get to know each other better?
Yeah, with a purpose, though. one of the best ways to build a relationship is to help other people.
Right.
So find ways that you can help other people. If networking is just transactional, hey, look, if you help me out, I'll help you, then it's not going to work well if it's a transactional relationship. My friend, Dr. Wayne Baker, calls that coin-operated networking. Let me put the coin in, give me the candy. That's a transactional relationship. Instead, it needs to be a transformational relationship. The best way to turn it into a transformational relationship is to find ways to help other people. And so in your networks, if you can meet people that you want to build a relationship with, find out what their goals and objectives are, and if you can help them accomplish that, that's one of the quickest ways to expedite the relationship. Now you've helped them, no strings attached, and they're much more likely to be able to help you and want to help you should the time arise that you need help. You see, it's not just your database. A lot of people think it's all about having a great database.
That's right.
Okay, it kind of is, but not completely. The question isn't who's in your database. The question is who can you pick up the phone and call and have them take your call and have them do what you need. Can you call that person and ask for a favor and get it? That's what counts. It's not just the database. It's how deep in the relationship that you have with the database. How many people are you at profitability with in terms of helping one another? That's the key to building a powerful network.
I had to take myself out of the equation. I had to look at all of these other businesses that were out there and, which ones were working and which ones weren't. And the ones that invested in themselves were the ones that were able to grow. And I think it's really making a distinction between spending and investing. When you spend, when you buy something, a pair of jeans or, some food, and you use that up, all you have is, the good memories, or, maybe it makes your butt look cute, but that's about all you get out of it. You don't get the extra benefit, right? And so when you invest in something, the key is to make investments that you think will grow into something more, that you're putting money towards something that will produce a return. And coming from finance, that's something I'm really behind. Like, if you can show me a way to make a return on my money, I will invest any amount of money towards that because it's sort of a no-brainer. So for me, it was really trying to take myself out of it, taking the personal, emotional piece out of it, and looking at it, will I get a return on this? But it was also much easier for me to do once I reached a financial comfort level and said, okay, I have enough money to live the lifestyle that I need to live. I'm not going to end up in a box. Worst case scenario, I blow all this money, I've got this budget, and I blow it all, it will be fine. And it's just having that rational discussion and hopefully having somebody who supports you. I'm very fortunate. I have a supportive husband who knows that I'm a little crazy about these things. So using him as a sounding board, like, am I being an idiot here? Like, is it okay for me to invest? I'm thinking it's okay, and here's why, and here's the return, and him agreeing and going, yes, that makes sense. And getting the blessing, because it's so much easier for me to counsel somebody else and say, yeah, that's a no-brainer, but when you're in the middle of it, sometimes you can't see the forest for the trees.
Your definition of networking, which is the cultivating of mutually beneficial give and take win-win relationships. Can you tell me about that definition and break it down for everybody? Because I know a lot of the people watching know networking is important. They just don't know how to do it.
Yeah, well, it's interesting, Connie. I think that as much as networking has been in the vernacular for the last probably 50 years anyway, I think that's what it's been called for about 50 years. It's been around a lot longer than that. And even though there are great teachers today, such as Ivan Meisner, who he's a hero of both of ours, and people who just do a great, terrific job teaching on networking, there are still so many people who have not really been introduced to the concept in the way that it really is supposed to manifest itself. So they get this picture in their mind's eye when they hear the word networking. They picture the stereotypical networking sales guy, right? That person who kind of goes in and works the crowd, glad hands, backhand, shakes hands, sticks a business card aggressively into the face of everybody. No, and they say, hey, give me a call, cut you a deal, or if you or somebody you know needs a witchamahoozy, feel free to call. And of course, that's not what networking is. When we say the cultivating of mutually beneficial give and take, or we could say give and receive win-win relationships, what that really means, Connie, is nothing more than knowing where your focus should be. Your focus should be on the other person, trying from the get-go or from the give-go to provide value to that person in a way that they see that value. When you do that, now you've separated yourself from everyone else, or not everyone else, but from the majority of people who still go in there with the idea of what can I get from these people? Success is an interesting thing because it can be defined in so many ways. On a very basic level, success is simply accomplishing a particular goal. I had a goal starting 3 months ago to lose 20 pounds in 3 months. I ended up actually getting the 20 pounds after what I wanted to do. But let's say I got 18 pounds there with the time limit. I didn't reach my goal by 2 pounds, okay? Was I successful? Well, not in terms of losing the 20 pounds in the time limit. I was 95% successful, I guess. That would be 18 pounds out of 20. I was more successful than had I lost 10 pounds or had I lost none. But, so it can be, if you're in a baseball game, the team that wins 5-0, they were successful in terms of winning or losing. The team that lost was not successful in terms of winning or losing, but perhaps they played better than they ever had before against a superior team of talent, and so they were successful. So, you see, it can be defined in so many different ways, and that's okay. It has nothing to do with relativism. It's a matter of, with certain contexts, within certain contexts, success means different things. We take different definitions that people have. You've got Earl Nightingale, who said success is the progressive realization of a worthwhile dream or idea, worthwhile dream or goal. And it's funny because what he was saying was true success is just knowing that you are working your way toward your dream or goal. He wasn't even talking about reaching the finish line. To him, the very idea of success was you're reaching to that for that worthwhile or worthy dream or ideal or goal or what have you. Of course, if it's not a worthy goal, like in other words, if your goal was to be the best drug dealer in the city, he wouldn't call that success. That's not a worthwhile goal. You know what I'm saying? So we want to always go back to the premise and look at what it is. I see success on an overall level as sort of a feeling of peace of mind and genuine happiness based on having done one's best to live up to their potential.
Can you just outline some of the key messages, the key takeaways for how we have more time than less?
Exactly. Well, it's become the fundamental truth of modern life is that we are all pressed for time, right? We all say we are busy, busy, busy. But I tell people, if you actually look at how you are spending your hours, be very accountable for them, you start to realize that we devote a lot of time to things that are not necessarily that important to us. We're doing them either because we've always done them, because we think other people expect them. It's just the way things are done. But time is a choice. And if you can get your head around that idea, there is really no limit to what you can do with 168 hours we are all granted each week. I mean, if you think about that, every single person on this planet has the same 168 hours, right? Some people have more money, some people may have more of whatever else, but we all have the same amount of time. So the lives we live are a function of how we spend those hours, and once you start thinking that way, you start being a little bit more careful with them.
So what are some of your favorite tips and strategies that you learned from writing the book?
Well, I think that being accountable for our time is very important. If you've ever tried to lose weight, you know that nutritionists will tell you to keep a food journal because it keeps you accountable for everything that's going in your mouth. If you're trying to get out of debt, you write down what you're spending because otherwise we spend mindlessly. And it's the exact same thing with time. Many of us devote hours to, say, surfing the internet, to checking our email every 20 minutes, even though we're supposed to be working on something else, and then we look up at the clock 3 hours later, the afternoon is gone. Was that devoted toward things that are advancing us toward our professional goals? Probably not. So definitely telling people to keep track of how they're spending their time, because then you can start to ask, well, is this how I want to be spending my time? That's another huge question. You know, people always say, well, I want to save an hour a day, right? Or if only I had another 15 minutes. And I say, well, okay, if you did, what would you do at that time, right? What would you do? What would be the most important thing you could do at that time? Because I bet there is 15 minutes somewhere. So if you are very clear on what you would do at that time, then you can start finding that time to actually do it.
How can they influence the interviewer or a hiring manager into thinking that they're the best candidate?
Oh, golly, how long have you got, golly? This is one of your...
Just one tip or two, maybe.
Well, if I had, let's go for 3 useful and
Okay.
research, understanding who you're speaking to as much as you can. It's so obvious, the company, looking on LinkedIn, reading the company blurbs, looking through the newspapers, Googling the person, just so that you have a little bit of a feel, if you can. You may not, but these days there's so much information, as we know, and it's foolish to overlook it. Same as it's so much information about yourself. So you need to be aware of what's out there online about yourself, that's obvious. But as far as when you're actually in that meeting, being prepared to be unprepared, if you like, treating it like a conversation. I think a lot of people, as we all do, the word interview, it has kind of, spotlight on you, everyone across the desk, I'm in the wrong, I've got to prove that I'm okay. An interview is a conversation. And I know that when you are stuck, or when it's been a while since you've been successful in an interview, I do know that there's an added pressure. And it's still a conversation. And so when you think about it as a conversation you're having, versus a yes, no, and what's going to be fired at me, versus, hey, I'll bang a few things over the net, I think that's one of the big things. Think about it as a conversation. And in a conversation, you pause, you often sort of stare into space and think, that's quite a good question, or I haven't thought of that one. So you buy yourself that crucial time, versus think you have to know the answer straight away. And be prepared to say, that's a good one, I've not thought of that. Can I come back to you in an email? At least for being honest, the worst thing, and we all know the old, excuse the sort of expression, but the BS-ometer. And all I can say is people can spot it and sniff it a mile off. So I always say, if I don't know, I know I'll be able to find out. That's honest and that's engaging.
Kay talks about the fact that you'll be a more positive and powerful communicator if you use I less, and instead substitute it with we, us, our. Leaders use words like that because it includes others versus excluding others. And those subtle changes will make such a huge difference in how you communicate and also how you're perceived.
I'm curious, you talk about the importance of partnering with the right people. Is that a theme that you also see in other people's career paths, or what are some of the success similarities that you see across careers?
I think so. I think it's the key to me is being excited about what you're doing. And I was excited for 11 of the 14 years I was at Goldman. And in the 2.5 to 3 years when I was back after I'd had my 2 children.
Enthusiasm and optimism, that is a great jumping board for this lesson around career reinvention. I do see a lot of job seekers who are who get discouraged, who get anxious, especially in a market like this one. And when you're trying to do a career change, when there's that difficult job search, it's very, very understandable that there's going to be, things that are going to test your enthusiasm and your optimism. But I really think Janice, hit the nail on the head with this one. I know from a recruiting standpoint, when, and Connie, jump in on the chat on this one, but I know from a recruiting standpoint, there were so many instances where the enthusiastic candidate, the candidate that had the desire, where you can see that they wanted this and they really had a positive attitude about what they were going for, that was really attractive to the hiring manager, to the recruiter, to their potential colleagues. So it's something to think about, that focus on enthusiasm and optimism, and to work specifically on that to get that back into your search.